Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Tech Leaders Unplugged. And today we are getting unplugged with Dustin Diaz, the head of engineering at Duro. First of all, thank you, Dustin, for joining us today. And of course, thanks, Wade, my fellow teammate and co-host. Thank you for joining us both here.
Thanks.
Awesome.
So, Dustin, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about you, what your background is, anything you want to say about yourself. Now's your moment. And then, of course, tell us a little bit about Duro, and then we'll go from there. Thank you, and welcome to Tech Leaders Unplugged.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Carlos. Happy to be here. Well, I'm out here in Los Angeles, another sunny day, although I can't think of many other places in the country that are not sunny these days. Well, I've been in software for just about 20 years now. I came out of college with a Spanish degree and a minor in cultural anthropology. And so really, back in the 90s, it was not so much about getting a computer science degree and whatnot. It was just more of a hobby. And so, that led into a foray of companies and products and projects that I've worked on since then. I've been at Yahoo, a small business team. I was at Google on Gmail, early employee at Twitter, and a founding engineer at Medium. And then that kind of first describes the primary 10 years of my career. And the latter 10, I kind of took that fork in the road into leadership and management. I was at Mix.com with the co-founder of Uber. I ran my own business for a while. That went under from COVID in 2020. It was a platform for booking talent like actors, models, musicians, what have you. And certainly, when lockdown happened, really our bookings took a dive. We pulled out a Series A. And ultimately, a year after that, shut down the company. So since then, I did some contract work, fractional CTO. More recently at Route.com as an engineering leader. But currently, I'm head of engineering at Duro Labs. As we like to say, Duro is for disruptors. It's PLM for hardware manufacturers. We get a lot of companies in the space and robotics industry, and so we're doing a lot of cool stuff there. That's a bit about me. On the other side, I do a lot of running. I'm a master's marathoner. I think one day I have a goal of winning a major marathon, whether that's Boston or New York or whatnot. Not as the primary rating, but as the winner of like an age group. So whether that's 40, 45, 50-year-olds, that would be a pretty cool thing to happen.
Great.
That's awesome, Dustin. Thank you for sharing a little bit about your background. And now, Dustin, I understand that today we're going to be talking about the topic as chosen by you is high trust, low blame cultures, the North Star objective for engineering teams. This is an interesting topic, Dustin. So tell us why you chose this topic and why you thought it was relevant for today's day and age. Let's start there, please.
Yeah, I think it's massively relevant now. I think, within tech, we often think the largest challenges ahead of us are actually tech related at that. It's about optimizing this framework or using that library or how we're going to scale this platform. And that, we often think about these challenges as something to be overcome. And in reality, I think so many of them are just solvable. And really the hardest, the largest barrier ahead of us is ourselves as people and how we communicate and collaborate and whatnot. And so one thing in particular that has been top of mind for me in the last few years has been engineering productivity and just really how to create more efficient teams. So more recently, there's been a framework that was released as a white paper, if you want to call it that, out of GitHub, which I guess you could say out of Microsoft, called the Space Framework. I don't know if you guys have heard about Space, or if you've talked about that in the past, but effectively that's an acronym for really, in short, satisfaction, like developer well-being, so to speak, like developer happiness is the S. The P is for performance, like how well the things they produce are performing. The A, I think, is something that a lot of younger engineering leaders or less experienced engineering leaders tend to focus on as something that is successful, is for activity. And that's things just like raw commits, pushes to production, things like that. It's a really like naive Elon Musk way of thinking, just like how many lines of code are you writing, and that is how successful you are. But that's only like one variable in this whole setup here. What is it? What am I on? SPA. C is for, I think officially in the framework it's for communication, but I like to tie a bunch of C's to it, which is communication, collaboration, coordination, clarity. And then that last one in there is for efficiency itself. So the whole like work smarter, not harder, and what have you. And this framework is a guide to understand engineering productivity, not to in particularly like measure it itself. There are other tools and systems out there to like measure it with like numbers itself. One is like Duro metrics. I think at this point, in this day and age, like every engineering leader has heard of Duro.
That's okay.
Well, sounds a little sad there.
Wants to be part of the show.
Yeah, it's like, Dad, come on. Promise. So Duro, I mean, by now there's a ton of platforms out there that can consume your GitHub data or GitLab or whatever, Bitbucket, just your repository data, alongside your tracking system, whether that's Linear, Asana, Jira, whatever, and they kind of mash it up together, and that'll tell you how well you're doing on cycle times or your recovery rates, things like that. And that's easier to say like, oh, here's how we're doing in those areas. But with Space, it's certainly on the softer side of things. Putting this all into perspective, I know this is a lot of like context for it all. Of all this research that's came out of Duro, which I think now it's been like 10 years, they do this annual report called the DevOps Research Assessment Report. In 2022's version, obviously we haven't done 2023's. Aside from all these metrics, all these variables or whatever, the biggest factor in efficient teams is having a high trust, low blame culture. And to me, that kind of ties back even to the Space framework. That S is like that most important variable, which is satisfaction, developer happiness, just people enjoying their jobs, people, engineers enjoying what they're doing, feeling challenged, and like they're making a difference. I'll pause there if there's any kind of direction you want to go in that.
No, I think that's a great summary. Yeah, this is an area that obviously we don't talk a lot about, whether it is in hardware or software development, is these more softer side of things that are, often not presented. It's always, getting the product out the door, like you said, release times, all those efficiencies are measured in much more tactical kinds of things. And, as humans, it interests me that your degree was in anthropology, and then a lot of your, previous, endeavors were around, kind of social networks, social interaction, and then, which is software development, all right? And then to be at a PLM company that's largely tied to hardware, which is traditional engineering and thought of that, tell me a little bit about how some of that background that you had in social networks and all of that, and the kind of the more social interaction kind of software fed into this PLM space that is really traditionally driven from hardcore electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, those kind of things, and the collaboration that a tool like that needs.
I mean, if I could be transparent and completely honest, like I don't have a background in hardware. I don't have a background in PLM. You know, I came into Duro as someone knowledgeable in software systems and managing teams. And so I think a lot of startups at this day and age, you know, their biggest struggles are execution and efficiency. And so certainly many of the engineers on the team are aware of, you know, what that process is like. Some have been in electrical or mechanical engineering, have worked within other PLM systems. And, you know, so I didn't come in with my PLM expertise by any means. You know, there's still days where I'm just like, I don't understand this whole part, but I trust that our team will figure that out. And so I'm not that guiding beacon of light to get, you know, to basically say, oh, here's how this should work and whatnot. When it comes to software architecture, sure, I sit in our architecture review meetings. On occasion, I'll still do a code review here and there. Not so much as to say, here's how it should work, but just more like, here's some guidance and some feedback. Take it as you will, but otherwise looks good to me. You can either use that and, you know, address that there, or open up a separate follow-up pull request for whatever. And so I do try to stay out of that. And so my background in other social networks really just stems from my passion for culture and people. Really, I feel like that's why I got into web development to begin with, because this is where all the people were. This is where I feel like my kind lived. I don't know. It wasn't really until Twitter where I feel like I found my footing and interest in these types of systems. But even before that, I was really big into joining like online forums and whatnot, chat rooms, as I'm sure many others, you know, have been part of. But it's something I really enjoyed, and so it was cool to make impact on a platform. At least back then. These days, I don't know what's going on with Twitter, and so keep that out of the conversation. But it was cool to make a difference there. Like Twitter was seen as this like cultural phenomenon that really made a huge impact in the world.
So we talked about high trust, low blame. Obviously, that is driven by the culture, which is driven by leadership, right? I mean, a lot of things that are the culture, they bubble up from the people that are employed, and then others are really mandated through policy and you know, the actions of leadership. Tell me a little bit about how you would change a culture that to move towards a more high trust, low blame, you know, command and control type leadership, to be more inclusive and open to new ideas that allow for failure, and don't, you know, punish the failure. What do you can you provide a little bit about how that might be introduced into a company?
It's funny because I often hear about all these things in other like leadership blog posts, books, podcasts, and whatnot. And I feel like we talk about it a lot, but it's so much easier said than done. I can't even say it's been the easiest road, even for me at Duro. You know, trying to you know, get each team member to trust one another. It's easy to just say, hey guys, let's trust each other. And you can try and enforce that with policy, but even then it feels like that's being forced. And so the trick is to try and make it feel organic. And so I do my best to kind of empathize with the team and let my own hair down, figuratively. Not a whole lot of hair here. and say, here's where I struggle and here's what I'm trying to do with the team. I started by placing some values into the daily conversation. I plug them into our interview guides so that when you're interviewing with us, it actually shows what we're hoping to have be one of our core behaviors. So trust is certainly one of them. Think about the opposite or the antithesis of high trust, low blame. It's low trust, high blame. Think about cultures that regularly blame each other, and you can see how much deadlock they run into, and how that can lead into a certain kind of burnout. Other ways of implementing is really, we're a distributed team, and a lot of other teams out there nowadays are, spread across the world. Duro invests quite a bit of its resources into gathering our teams together. So, every 6 to 8, 9 weeks or so, we actually fly out the entire dev team and we bring them into Los Angeles and we spend a whole week together. And, not a lot of like technical, hard work gets done, but it is a place where, we get to have conversations and just get to know each other as people, which, you can try that on Zoom and whatnot, but the reality is like nothing really beats just being in the same room, at least to get to know one each other and just talk about other things, so that when everyone flies back to their homes and whatnot, there's a higher sense of empathy, and that we feel like we want to be there for one another. We trust each other a little bit better. And so that ultimately leads, I think, to higher productivity, which in the end, as a business goal, is something you want.
Dustin, I think let me just jump in. I have a burning question here.
Yeah.
I think it's easier to have a North Star, right? When you have, for example, you might have a distributed team that is domestic. For example, you might be in Los Angeles, you have someone in Brooklyn, and it's all distributed all over the place. I think it's easier to have that particular North Star. But what about when teams are like global? For example, you have someone in Los Angeles, like just yourself, but you have someone in, I don't know, Singapore, Ukraine, Buenos Aires, or whatever. So what factors come in play from your perspective to make sure that everyone works or seamlessly or harmonically, and in order to produce desirable outcomes?
Yeah, Duro certainly is spread across the world. We have engineers all over the U.S., from Portland to LA to New York to Pennsylvania, whatever. Every U.S. time zone, we have also other members in Pakistan, India, Africa. and Duro was in the first place for me like this as well. I feel like I've managed teams in every time zone on the planet so far, as far as I can think of. And I think it is important to have some sort of core overlap. But yeah, we have our touch points and we have our syncs. And those are more really to get some face-to-face time and check in how we're doing. But really, we're all communicating on Slack, or some other teams. It's Teams or whatever. And so that again comes into high trust. The goal of our syncs is not to get in and micromanage and get the status of the work. We put everything in our project boards. We're certainly a linear shop. We use Geekbot to get status updates that way. And so at no given point am I having to go to anyone directly and be like, what's the status of this? What's the ETA on that project? The team enjoys it. And really, when we all do get on the webcam together and we're all in one Zoom or Google Hangout or whatever, it's more just of like a small time to catch up, just to check in if there's any other major blockers or what have you. But the way we run our stand-ups is not about the status of things. Like I say, that's a waste of time. We can get that from other project boards and whatnot. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, it certainly did. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I might have more, but I'm going to let Wade.
Yeah, I think, we have a few minutes left here. Of course, you have in the intro, you talked about some of your background at Yahoo, Google, and, co-founding a company with a particular, billionaire, well-known person, Garrett Camp there, that started Uber. Tell me a little bit about, a lot of the folks that watch this show are, software, entrepreneurial, those kinds of things. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about how you met somebody like that, went on to build later Uber, and what kind of what brought you together to build that Mix.com application and
yeah, Mix.com actually, it's still live. There's an app in the App Store. That started as another idea, which hopefully can stay buried, but I'll undig it for just a moment. It was this other app called Open Likes, which was this idea. I don't know if it's good or bad, but it was just a way to like put all of your interest in this one thing and whatnot. That's a side conversation. How Garrett and I met, I really feel is just serendipitous of living in San Francisco. And so I had a colleague who was there. He was Twitter's first designer. His name was Vitor Laurentia, and he was like a 19-year-old designer at Twitter, still contracting for Twitter out of Brazil, I believe. And we worked together at Twitter for a couple of years. Eventually, we parted ways, did different things. I don't know how he met Garrett, but I mean, how does anyone meet each other in San Francisco? I mean, I know Uber started there. They launched with 3 Blacktown cars. And I don't know. I think I was looking for one opportunity. Vitor was like, hey, you should come talk to Garrett. He's a pretty chill guy. Very nice, as is the classic Canadian stereotype. And we got to talking. We worked on this concept of his. It was his idea, Open Likes. Ultimately, we kind of combined some interest there. I ultimately morphed that into what became Mix. Now, obviously, I didn't buy Mix.com because I don't have Mix.com money. But we whipped that up for what I believe was a combination of both our interests. So I don't know if anyone knows this. So Garrett started Uber out of what was prior to that, which was StumbleUpon. So he was the guy that started StumbleUpon. And if I get my facts right, I think he sold that to eBay or PayPal or one of the two. Made some money of that, and I think he seeded Uber with that. But he's always had this interest and passion for the web and discovery and content and whatnot. If anyone here remembers StumbleUpon, it was literally like a Firefox toolbar extension to just keep clicking and find and discover new sites. And so Mix was really, I think, a culmination of a little bit of my background at Twitter and finding topics and interest in finding people and following those things, and his background of finding content on the web with StumbleUpon and kind of putting them together. I think the internal joke for the longest time was that we called it StumbleUpon 2.0. Yeah, working with him was a lot of fun. Ultimately, we had 2 devs on it in the beginning, and then Garrett. And so I think today they're still finding some success. There's, I don't know how many users at this point. I mean, it's been such a long time. I departed that in 2014, 2015, I think. Yeah.
Great. Thanks for that background.
Yeah.
I think, Carlos, we got a few minutes left. Did you have anything else you wanted to share?
Well, absolutely. Thank you, Wade. The only thing left for me is to, well, we're coming up on time, right? Unfortunately, but I would like to announce what's coming next. So next, our next guest on Tech Leaders Unplugged is going to be Omer Slavin, the CEO and founder of Betty. The topic is going to be Construct Tech Chronicles, and it's going to be about navigating efficiency, safety, and innovation with transformative cloud technology. And this is going to be happening on right here on Tech Leaders Unplugged on August the 22nd at 9:30 a.m. Pacific. That's going to be on next Tuesday, I believe. So that's what I have, Wade. And the last thing for me is simply thanking Dustin for having agreed to be here on the show. And I look forward to many more conversations. I know that there could be some potential convergences. So anyway, Dustin, thank you so much for having been such a gracious guest. And we're going to be in touch.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Carlos. Wade, I appreciate it.
Sure. Have a good day.
Dustin, stay on as we go off the air. Okay. Thank you, folks. See you next time.